Hey, welcome to the 167. Today we're talking Back to Better and Batman. Welcome to the 167. Hey, welcome back to the 167. I am here with the 3D painting shirt.
Yes.
It does it.
I'm going to stare at it long enough.
Yeah, if you stare at it, you can start to see some images
It's like
appear.
a dolphin that pops out of it.
Yeah.
The Pastor Rick George of
Good
New
morning.
Life Community Church, none other.
Yes, here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I think it sums it up to say that
A pastor.
a Pastor Jake Reeves.
Reeves.
If you don't know, he's wearing a shirt that says Summit.
I have not earned the yet, so.
Yeah.
And the pastor, a pastor, and pastor, a pastor. And I'm Pastor Lucas Motley, substitute pastor, also of New Life Community Church. Do you guys also work here?
Sometimes.
Excellent. So
Only
here
on Sundays.
Yeah. Just one day a week.
on the 167 this week, we're continuing talking about our series Back to Better. Talking about getting better as we get back to it, not going back to normal. And this week we talked about really talking to people about what are the things that we need to leave behind us. We talked about leaving our baggage behind.
Yeah.
So I had this question just first of all, because you mentioned this, I thought it was an excellent point. You talked about people that are slaves to things and they don't know that they're slaves to things. We were talking about serving things, having idols, or having things in our life that are holding us back from going to the next thing. So what are some of the things that you guys think that people can be slaves to, but they don't even know it?
I mean, there are so many.
Let me list the ways.
Yeah. So what
In
jumped
rapid
out-
fire, in alphabetical
so
order.
what jumped out in my mind when beginning to think through this is approval. People become a slave to other people's approval. Cultural norms, would fall into that. So I want to be looked at and approved by everyone else. Therefore, I do whatever I need to do to get that approval, which I'm enslaved by that. I can't really do what I would desire to do on one hand because I have to gain the approval of the people around me. So that would be one that just jumped out in my mind.
You are exactly right.
Well, it got,
That is good. Yes, I am all on board. And
it got
whatever.
two ums.
It did.
I feel like we need to, like create a scale where it's like, is it a or is it a Like how many does it get?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think approval is one. And tell me specifically, what do you guys think of? So I'm worried about the approval of others. How is that holding me back spiritually?
Because it really doesn't matter what I'm reading in Scripture. It's like, yes, I understand it. Yes, I'm drawn to that. But if I do that, it's likely to create some tension in my social circles, and it might be met with some disapproval of me saying, well, I can't do this any longer because of this, and I want their approval more than I want obedience to God.
Yeah, you're going to struggle with obedience. You're
Yeah.
going to struggle with obedience,
You're
really.
gonna struggle with obedience and even being vocal about what you believe.
Yeah.
If you read in the Bible and it's like, hey, listen, sex is for the context of marriage and that's it. And you're friends with a couple who are having sex outside of marriage and they're like, what do you think about, isn't our relationship great? You're like, do you really want to know what I think about your relationship?
Yeah, and it's not. So the reason I think that came to my mind is that in itself is not something that's out there that, occasionally someone wrestles with. I think it's something that the majority of people wrestle with, that acceptance and not wanting to be the oddball, or like we really struggle with wanting the acceptance of other people, and it enslaves us. I can't leave this because if I do, then I'm going to lose my friend group, or people are going to talk about me, or they're not going to like me, and so I gotta protect that part of me. It's a weird dynamic that lots and lots of people wrestle with.
Well, and I think that I don't know if it's a separate thing that they're struggling with, they're enslaved to, or maybe it's a manifestation of that same thing. Maybe it's related or linked. But I think that people sometimes are a slave to their schedule.
Yeah.
And I think some of that has to do with, well, I told, I don't want to disappoint my kids, so I'm going to, coach their baseball team or whatever. But I also told my buddy I'd go do this, and I also told somebody I'd do that. And so I want to be well liked by these people. And or maybe it's, I want to make sure that my kid does this or that. But it's like we start to become slaves to all the things, to busyness. And so I think that that's something that we go, well, I'm just in a busy season. I'm like, dude, you've been in a busy season for 8 years.
Yeah. People become slaves to pleasure, like just doing things that are fun. And I'm just seeking the new fun thing, and it consumes your schedule. And now I'm in this routine where I can't get out of it. We become a slave to so many things, and we don't see it as something that's keeping us in bondage when it really is. We become slaves to, the career path. I want to become this, and everything in my life is driven by this desire to achieve this certain level of whatever it is, and I can't get out of that cycle. Like it consumes everything about me.
I think those are interesting too, because sometimes you'll see somebody who's like, I'm up for a promotion or I'm this and that. I'm like, oh yeah, is that better for you? And they're like, well, it's more money. And I'm like, but do you like your, do you like your job? Do you like what you do? Is that going to be more fulfilling to you? And it's like, well, no, I really like what I'm doing now, but I could do this. And then they do that and they make more money and they're miserable.
Yeah. And so you become a slave to something when it's causing you to do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do, or you don't even like doing necessarily, but I have to continue doing it because I'm trying to get to this place. And so, yeah, people sacrifice their integrity oftentimes in this pursuit of career, aspirations, whatever. And so you start to do things that you never thought you would do, and you're like, I can't get out of it. I have to do this. Good indication that you're becoming a slave to something that might have been intended for your blessing, your job.
Yeah.
Well, now you've become a slave to it, and you're in this vicious cycle that's causing harm, and it's not producing something good any longer.
Yeah, I feel like another kind of sticky one along with that is meant as a blessing that some people fall into. And I see it a lot more with people that are stepping new into the faith, or maybe their family heritage just didn't love Jesus a whole lot. And that is family or family tradition in a sense, where they step into this new faith, they're excited, but then there are some things that are unhealthy in their family. Maybe it is the family owns their schedule. Maybe it's the way the family parties, whatever it is. And they can't step out of that because they're like, it's family,
Right.
It's family, it's
Family.
It's Olive Garden.
Didn't Hank Williams Jr. do a family tradition?
Family tradition. So,
Bringing in old
but I
Hank.
mean, that's tough. Yeah.
No, I see that a lot in newly married couples is they don't know how to balance. Like, you tell somebody you're married, you leave your family, she
Yeah.
leaves her family, and you are your new family. But that's not how it feels at Christmas time and Thanksgiving. It's, whose family are we going to go spend time with? And they're both clamoring for you to come back into their family. And it's like, no, man, you are a new family. And so if you're not careful, you can get caught up in, being a slave to, still pleasing your parents or like pleasing, doing all these things for the family. And it's bad for your actual nuclear family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you see that with people's kids too. Like, I don't know where you guys think that the line gets drawn here between I want to be self-sacrificial for my children versus my children have now become something I'm in bondage to.
Where the line is. Yeah. I mean, that is.
Tell us, oh wise one,
Yeah.
where that line is.
I mean,
No, that was my question to you.
Oh, it's like,
Tell me.
I mean, it's that constant feedback meter of, when the Holy Spirit lays something, whether it's an event or a rendezvous with a person or whatever it is, or a serving opportunity, and you cannot say yes because you literally are in bondage to what you have laid out in the rest of, your life, you probably have a problem. Like, that's probably a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, yeah, there are a plethora, an abundance.
It's like,
Would you say I have a plethora of
Yeah.
piñatas?
Yeah. So it is like a limitless number of challenges that we face, that we walk willingly into these places of bondage or slavery in life, and we just get consumed by it.
Yeah. Versus the flip side of that, which what we were talking about this week, is being a slave to righteousness. What does that look like for people usually on a day-to-day basis to be a slave to righteousness rather than a slave or in bondage to something else? I think that it's weird because I feel like that has such a negative connotation in our culture.
yeah.
Multiple times in the New Testament, Paul describes himself this way, as that I am a slave to Christ, that I have become a bond servant to Christ. Like that has a really bad connotation in today's culture. What does that look like to be a slave to righteousness and a slave to Christ?
So in my mind, it simply means that I am a willing servant of Jesus, that I have a desire deep in my heart to just be obedient. Whatever I'm asked to do, whatever I see, a willingness to change when I'm reading something that convicts me, when the Holy Spirit prompts something inside of me, just a joyful willingness to say yes. That's being a bondservant or a slave to Christ, to say, you're calling the shots. You're the one that I willingly and joyfully follow. And so whatever you say, I will do. I'm not going to seek my own pleasure, my own desires. Am I always successful? Heck no. It's
Yeah.
like, but that's my desire. And so I want to become, that bond servant. And there's so much negativity or negative perceptions to this idea of bondservant or becoming a slave to righteousness. And somehow in our recent culture, we have connected, the 1800s, early 1900s, slave trade market in Western culture and all of the evils that presented. Like, we've associated that with the biblical view of a bondservant or a slave, and we've kind of merged those two things together to say, to become a slave to righteousness is this wicked, evil thing that, it's like, it's not. It's a whole different concept.
And we live in a individualistic society where it's like, I don't want anybody to be in charge of me. I don't want to have to be responsible or serve anybody. Like, we always want to be top dog. But so tell me a little bit about the difference. Like, when I'm a bond servant in Israel times, the Hebrew understanding of a bond servant, does it look more like Jacob when he's trying to get Rachel and Leah? Does it look like Joseph when he works for Potiphar? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think it literally, it looks like me as an individual saying, I present myself to you willingly, and I choose to follow you and to serve you. And in return, what we see is they are compensated or taken care of, for their servitude, but it's a willingness to say, I will lay down my life and my desires for you, for what you desire. So for me as a Christ follower to say, I am not forced to do this. I get to choose, and I choose willingly to lay my life down to you and to follow you. That is way different than, this person demanding and forcing and abusing me to the place where I have to follow. That two totally different things. It's me saying, I have a choice, and I can go this way or this way, and my heart says, I love you, and I respect you, and I want to serve you.
When you describe that, do you know what that sounds like to me? Here we go. Are you ready for the deep dive?
Not really, but go ahead.
It sounds like Alfred from Batman. Do you know Alfred Pennyworth? No? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, he serves the Wayne family. Like
Yeah.
he raises Bruce as like almost like his own kid, but he's a servant. He's the butler.
Yeah.
But he's, he's compensated. He lives in the mansion with them, but his whole purpose is devoted to raising this kid and making him healthy and then helping him keep his secret identity that fights crime. But it feels like that, where it's like he could have left at any time. He could quit. He could, but he's not just compensated. He's not just like, I'm doing the bare minimum for the pay, and I really hate my job, and like he's going above and beyond in everything, and he feels like family.
Yeah. So I hear regularly, this whole argument against, Christianity and the slavery of, and it just is not the same. It isn't. It is not a forced labor based on the color of my skin or the place that I'm from or the way I was raised. It's simply a willingness to lay my life down, and there's no comparison there.
Yeah, this really is one of those areas that we are so far removed from the culture that they were living in. It's really hard for us not to take our modern sensibilities. For those just listening, I'm doing air quotes,
quote unquote,
quote unquote, modern sensibilities, where there would be people that would legitimately, because scarcity of materials and there was no necessarily government program or organizations, a lot of times they would step into a bondservant role to a master that could. Now, I'm not saying that was how everything existed, but it did not exist in the way that our minds and we were taught, like you said. And so to willingly step into that is a hard thing for us to swallow, and to just, because you're giving up your identity for the master.
But you're right when you said, in our culture today, we have so much focus on, my worth and my, who I am as a person, and you need to validate me, and I need to be happy, and it's all about the pursuit of, my pleasure and my recognition. And so to suggest even that you become a bondservant or to lay those things down for, like, it meets a lot of resistance, and I understand that, but the heart of the Christian faith is this willingness to say, I will lay my life down. It's not me, it is you. You are more important. Christ is more important, and I'm willing to lay that down.
Well, and I think when you say that, it makes me think that you're gonna be in service to to something.
It's true, yeah. Where he says that you can't serve two masters. You're gonna serve one.
Yeah, you're gonna pick one or the other. And like most people think of themselves in a very neutral space, and it's like there is no neutral.
Or they
space.
think of themselves as the master.
Yeah. Right. And it's like, but that's the thing. You're gonna serve yourself. You're gonna fall into bondage in your job, in your kids. And I'm going, unless you are actually picking something and saying purposely, I want to serve righteousness. Like I want to do good things and I want to serve Christ. And you think that the lack of focus in that makes you neutral. It's like, no, the lack of focus that makes you wishy-washy. And then you're going to end up falling into bondage to something else that you don't even realize.
Yeah. So when I mentioned on Sunday, I had that real quick flashback. I just had another one of those with not quite as far back, but Bob Dylan.
Oh, yeah.
So he has a song that says, you got to serve somebody.
Yeah.
Right? So he says, it might be the devil or it might be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody.
Can you sing it like Bob Dylan?
Yeah. So
You gotta serve.
So, yeah, you got to. That was 3 really bad.
Really bad
Really
Bob
bad Bob
Dylan
Dylan.
impressions.
But you are going to serve someone. You're going to be a slave. You're going to be in bondage to something, right? So do I choose to be a bondservant for the good of Christ and to the good of culture and in the pursuit of righteousness, or apart from that? It's not a matter of if I'm going to serve, it's who and what am I going to serve?
Well, and I think then it begs the question of what kind of servant do I want to be? Do I want to be, like I said, I just have this on my brain because I'm listening to some other sermon series right now, but it's on Joseph. And I think about that with Potiphar and then the jailer, where he gets sold by his brothers. I mean, like he has every right to be like, but he gets sold to Potiphar, and it says that he's so faithful and God's hands on him that he puts him in charge of his whole house. And the guy doesn't even know how much money he has. That's how much he trusts Joseph, where he's like, Joseph's got it. And I'm like, what is that to be that servant to righteousness in God, where God's like, oh man, pastor, like they got it. Like Lucas has got it. And being faithful in that, in those things, like, do I want to be that servant, or do I want to be the servant that's like, and then like I said, he goes to jail and the jailer does the same thing. And it's like, that's about his character. And I'm going, do I want to do that, or do I want to be the servant where God's like, I've told you 10 times, you got to stop doing.
Yep. So yeah, that righteous living has blessings, right? And that's what the better part is. Or we can choose to be a bondservant or a slave to something else and remain broken or in bondage. And again, like I said, it's the beautiful thing about the Christian life is God says, what do you want to do? Like, it's totally up to you.
Yeah.
Do you want blessed or do you want broken? You get to decide.
Well, and the last thing I want to follow up with you on is something that you said that I think it should just break change and set people free, which is what you said. You said normal does not equal healthy. And I think that is so powerful for people, because I think a lot of people are like, I just want to be normal. I'm like, what if normal is not good?
Yeah.
So like, what are some of the areas that you see that with people, or see it in our culture? I mean, I think there's low hanging fruit, like, in America, obesity is becoming the norm.
Yep.
Like being unhealthy, like I'd rather eat a McDonald's than eat a salad. Like that's normal, but it's not healthy. Like, what are some other areas, maybe emotionally, spiritually, or physically, that you see in our culture that are things that people think are normal, and you're like, no, you don't even want normal. Normal's not healthy.
Yeah, I think a focus on self, like being so focused on me, my desires, like I am the center of everything, is normal, but it's not healthy. And I'm not saying that you should run yourself down and you shouldn't take care of yourself and that you have no value. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is the long-term effect of a culture that is so absorbed in self leads to destruction. Like, it is going to end very badly. And so everybody just becomes so consumed on what's best for me that the society as a whole begins to suffer greatly. Right?
Well,
and so that's a big one to me.
But that's part of my mental health. It's self-care.
Right. And self-care, okay? And so that's the problem. I'm not saying throw self-care out the window. I'm saying, as you're examining yourself, look at it in the context of the whole.
Right. If self-care is I go and run my credit cards up, that's not long-term self-care.
Yeah. Or that I'm alienating everyone else from my life, or I'm disregarding the needs of other people because of me. And it's, I know that this is important to this group, but I don't care because I need to take care of me. Instead of, no, the Bible says you are more valuable in this situation. I should consider you, it uses the term, you are more important than me. It's like, in our culture, that is like, oh, no. Mm-hmm. Like, they are not more, I am more important. Right? And so that's normal, but it's terribly unhealthy long term.
Yeah. What about you, Pastor Jake? What do you think are some of the areas that we consider normal that are not necessarily healthy in our culture?
All of them.
Don't be the world. We'll see you next time on the 167.
No. I mean, it's funny because immediately in my head, I went to kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier with, like, jobs and achievement and overworking. But it's funny because I think there's actually an interesting divide that is happening. I'm not enough of a social scientist to say where or when, but a divide that's happening between the generations where I'd say at least maybe millennials and up still are kind of in that. And then those behind us are almost flip the coin completely around and are concerned about the self-pleasure and, because I think, a lot of times they get directly painted as lazy, but I think a lot of it is more a self-interest in, pursuing my passions and stuff like that. And I don't know, like, so that's why I tried to paint this broad stroke. I'm like, well, I feel like it's kind of shifting though too, and not really for the best.
But I had a conversation with I would say a Gen Zer about this. They're like lower millennial and Gen Zer. I actually asked him about the way that they work, and he goes, yeah, millennials kind of chased money. And I said, yeah. And he goes, but he goes, we chase money too. I said, do you chase money or clout? And he goes, what's the difference? And I'm like, so you're telling me that you'd work at McDonald's as long as you had your own TikTok where you were a famous McDonald's worker? And he goes, yeah.
I was like, I've never encountered as many people. Like, I'm a smack dab in the middle of millennials, and the dream of even being a famous sports star, it was there, but that wasn't like this prevailing thing where it like blew my mind the number of times, when I was helping out with like youth and everything, that I'd have conversations with kids where legitimately like fame was what they wanted. They wanted, because it meant money, and it meant that they perceived it that they could control their life and everything like that. And I'm like, yeah, okay,
Yeah. So that is that pursuit of the fame or whatever, and
the kids call it clout.
Clout. Yeah. So it is like, that's a whole new world, because like I'm just discovering that there are people who make a lot of money on YouTube just going to garage sales and buying stuff from garage sales and filming them buying. And it's like, and now I'm making a lot of money doing that. I'm like, what?
Well, and I would say that's one of the
content,
things.
baby.
I know. It's like,
It's
what
content.
is?
I would say that's one of the things that is viewed as normal. Like, I was reading this article, and they did like, it was like the top 15 TikTokers, and it was like finding out who they really were. And it's people like that they're making content in their bedrooms where it's like cosplay, which is like they dress up in costumes, or like they have a little bit that they do. And they're like, the amount of content that they have to generate and how often and what, and like they interview these people, they do not leave their room.
Yeah.
Like these are people with severe social anxiety that have gone to social media to get friends, and they literally don't leave their bedroom because they just have this crippling anxiety. But they found a bit that they do on the internet, and they're like, if you've noticed this person, they're always in their bedroom. There's always the same backdrop, and it's like they never leave.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that if we never leave this podcast studio,
Just do 8 podcasts
and
a
we
day.
do a lot of podcasts, we're going to have clout.
It's going to get really
and it's going to be all
bad.
about us.
We're going to need an animal.
So, because now we have like, tens of viewers.
Yeah.
It's like we have we're starting. We're getting some followers.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. So, but how many viewers do you have to click like or the bell, or do we have
You can click
that?
like on YouTube or the bell to be notified, or make sure you give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. And so then if we get like 100,000 views, then we get like $20 or something.
I don't know.
I don't actually think we're monetized.
Yeah, you could end up partnering, with people coming and.
But that's what's so when I say that in jest, obviously,
Sure, yeah.
kinda. No, but that's what's driving. It's like me. I got to get me out there. I got to get my name. I got to get my video. It's all about me, because if me is out there, then I get taken care of, and I get some recognition, right? The approval of people, and the financial benefits of that.
When anyone will tell you that if you served at a soup kitchen, went on a missions trip, or prayed with somebody, you are much more mentally healthy and still have that same feeling of belonging and being that where. And then you're a slave to righteousness.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us here on the 167. We'll be back next week where we're going to be talking about Back to Better, and we'll probably switch seats because I'm preaching this weekend.
Look at that.
All right, we'll
Boom.
see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.